Welcome back to Innocent Stolen. This is a channel for Black excellence. On this channel, we discuss the lies that were buried and we discover the truth and bring it out into the presence because the truth shall always prevail. Thank you so much for joining Innocent Stolen. Today, we're going to discuss Earl D. Smith, a gentleman, 58 years old, found hanging from a tree on June 18, 2025. You heard it right, 2025, in Albany, New York.
Born under shadows of a cruel, cruel sky, where the whip cracked louder than a baby's first cry. They stole our names, they stole our grace, left us running in an endless race. Chains of yesterday, they still hold tight. In the daylight, we still fight for the right. Oh, we rise, but the weight don't fade. Still carry the scars of the price we paid.
Take a look at this man's face. This gentleman right here, 58-year-old Earl D. Smith. They said he committed suicide at 58 years old and hung himself from a tree? Come on now. If it wasn't for Earl's family and community feeling that the ruling of suicide felt rushed, incomplete, and of course, painfully familiar to the deep chapter in American history, this would not be spoken about. They would have tried to bury this too. Hanging, dark chapter in history. Didn't you think that this was behind us as a society? Well, let's talk about this story right here, because this story here of Earl Smith is very compelling. He's a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a great-grandfather whose death has sparked difficult questions about justice, investigation procedures, and whether the specter of lynching still haunts modern America. Earl D. Smith, he was born on October 17, 1966, at Nassau County Memorial Hospital, to Nathaniel Billy Smith and Mary Magdalene Saunders. He grew up in Roosevelt, New York, where he attended Roosevelt High School. Those who knew him remember a man who loved running back and had a deep appreciation for music. A good soul, a loving man, always had a smile on his face. By the time of his death, Earl had built a family legacy. He was survived by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, a man who lived nearly 6 decades, weathering life's challenges and celebrating its joys. According to those who know him, Earl had recently found renewed faith, having been baptized just weeks before his death, giving himself over to the Lord, recognizing that God is his Savior. His niece, Melissa Saunders, would later organize a GoFundMe page, writing, Earl was a husband, a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather. These simple words capture the multiple roles Earl played in the lives of those who loved him. Roles that make his sudden, violent death all the more devastating for those left behind. The man found hanging from the tree in Albany wasn't just a statistic or a case number. He was Earl, a person with hopes, a brand new life, relationships, and according to his family, no intention of ending his own life, much less hanging himself from a tree. On the morning of June 18, 2025, Earl D. Smith's body was discovered hanging from a tree in Albany, New York. The location, the method, the circumstances, all of it immediately triggered painful historical memories for the Black community, both locally and nationwide. Albany police responded to the scene and, based on what they called a preliminary investigation, they quickly determined that the circumstances appeared consistent with suicide, with no evidence to suggest that the incident is criminal nature. This rapid conclusion would become a central point of controversy, as you could imagine. The speed of the ruling troubled many. In cases involving Black men found hanging from trees, communities have learned to be skeptical of quick determinations, especially when the historical context of lynching looms large. The image of a Black man hanging from a tree carries weight that transcends individual circumstances. It connects to a brutal legacy of racial terrorism that claimed thousands of lives throughout not only American history, but history. You see, for Earl's family, the police explanation didn't align with the man they knew. They saw someone who had recently been baptized. And if you've ever been baptized, you know the joy your soul feels, the dedication that you're given over to the Lord. Your energy is renewed. You wake up every day feeling like there is something you can look forward to. He was someone connected to family, someone who they believed would not have taken his own life. His family knew him the best. The disconnect between the official ruling and the family's understanding of Earl created the foundation for their skepticism. And by right, thank God that Earl had a family that knew him well and loved him best. The news of Earl Smith's death and the quick suicide ruling spread rapidly through Albany's Black community and beyond. Social media became a platform for expressing doubt, sharing information, and organizing responses. TikTok posts highlighted Earl's recent baptism, questioning how someone who had just renewed their faith would immediately take their own life in the eyes of God. Community protests emerged, with residents demanding a more thorough investigation. Of course, the symbolism was powerful and disturbing. A Black man found hanging from a tree, quickly dismissed as suicide by authorities. For many, it echoed too closely the historical pattern of lynchings being ignored, minimized, or covered up by law enforcement. The community's skepticism was born in a vacuum. It emerged from decades of experience with cases where Black deaths were prematurely explained away, where investigations seemed cursory, where families' concerns were dismissed. Albany's Black residents had reason to question whether Earl Smith received the investigation his death deserved. The protests weren't just about Earl specifically. They were about a pattern that seemed to repeat itself across the entire country, not just Albany, New York. Black men found hanging from trees, quick suicide rulings. How is that? Grieving families left with questions, and communities forced to demand the thorough investigations that should have happened automatically. To understand the reaction to Earl Smith's death, we need to first acknowledge the historical reality of lynching in America and how it comes all too easy to the hands of the evil men. Between 1882 and 1968, nearly 3,500 African Americans were lynched in the United States. These weren't random acts of violence. They were acts of racial terrorism designed to maintain white supremacy through fear. Lynching was characterized by several elements: the targeting of Black individuals, public spectacle, community participation or approval, and the failure of authorities to investigate or prosecute the perpetrators. I'm gonna say that again. Just like how it's happening right now. The failure of authorities to investigate or prosecute the perpetrators. And these days, it's no different. They just call it suicide. Back in the day, often the victims were hung from trees, creating an enduring and traumatic symbol that resonates to this day. The lynching era officially ended decades ago, but its psychological impact persists. When Black families see a loved one found hanging from a tree, especially when authorities quickly rule it suicide, it triggers collective memory and trauma. The historical pattern of cover-ups and dismissals makes communities inherently suspicious of quick explanations. This historical context explains why cases like Earl Smith's generate such strong reactions. It's not that every hanging death of a Black person is automatically suspicious, but the historical precedent demands that such cases receive thorough, transparent investigations that address community concerns rather than dismissing them, like this in the case of Earl Smith. The legacy of lynching has created a burden of proof that authorities must meet when investigating such deaths of this nature. Quick rulings and preliminary assessments are insufficient when dealing with circumstances that echo historical racism, historical racial violence. No, this cannot be ruled as a suicide. In hours? Earl Smith's case is not isolated. Let's talk about the recent years of other several cases of Black men found hanging, and also have raised similar questions about investigation quality and conclusions. In 2020, during nationwide protests against police brutality, multiple Black men were found hanging in public spaces across the country of the United States of America. Robert Fuller, 24, was found hanging from a tree in Palmdale, California. Malcolm Harsh, 38, was discovered hanging from a tree in Victorville, California, just days earlier. Both deaths were initially ruled suicides, though Fuller's case was eventually reopened after community pressure and FBI involvement. In Mississippi, which has a particularly brutal lynching history, at least 8 suspected lynchings have been reported since the year 2000. Frederick Germain Carter was found hanging from a tree in Greenwood, Mississippi. The state medical examiner ruled it suicide once again, but relatives called it lynching and demanded federal investigation. Philip Carroll, 22, was found hanging from a tree in Jackson, Mississippi in 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, just 7 years ago. Regime Carter's death sparked calls from civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who argued that Carter was lynched and demanded Department of Justice intervention. The pattern is concerning. Black men found hanging from trees, quick suicide rulings by local authorities, skeptical families and communities, and demands for federal oversight. Each case raises questions about whether local investigations adequately consider the historical context and contemporary implications of such deaths. It is unbelievable, unconceivable that these authorities continue to say it is suicide within hours. What is wrong with society? What is wrong with these authorities? How do they think that the people are going to continue to accept this? What makes these cases particularly troubling is how they echo historical lynching patterns while occurring in an era when we should have moved beyond such horrors. The persistence of these cases suggests that either the threat of racially motivated violence continues or investigation standards need significant improvement. And I'm standing on both. Racially motivated violence does continue till this day, and the investigation standards, of course, they need improvement, or they may just need a heart. Investigating deaths like Earl Smith's presents unique challenges for law enforcement. The historical weight of lynching creates expectations for extraordinarily thorough investigations. While standard procedures may seem inadequate, given the symbolic significance of the circumstances, yet these investigators don't even put the effort in, the respect forward, the knowledge into the situation to say, hey, this doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. Something needs to be investigated deeper here. But we have to agree that several factors complicate these investigations. First, the immediate assumption of suicide can lead to confirmation bias, where investigators look for evidence supporting their initial conclusion rather than thoroughly examining all possibilities. Second, the historical context creates legitimate community skepticism that must be addressed through transparency and thoroughness rather than dismissed. Third, local law enforcement may lack the resources, expertise, or credibility needed to conduct investigations that satisfy community concerns. But that's not an excuse. In many cases, federal involvement becomes necessary, not just for investigative capacity, but for the legitimacy and trust. Just like the Central Park Five boys, teenagers between the ages of 14 to 16, wrongfully convicted. They did up to 13 years in jail until they were exonerated. Each one of them did their full sentences until someone actually admitted to the crime. But yet the police had their eyes on that person from the beginning and decided to change their course of investigation and put it onto 5 youths, Latinos, and Blacks. You see, the challenge itself extends beyond individual cases to systemic issues. How do we balance the reality that most hanging deaths are indeed suicides with the legitimate historical concerns of Black communities? How do we ensure that investigations are both efficient and thorough enough to address community concerns? Come on. Why would a man today, in today's society, choose to hang himself from a tree? Why? And how? The answer likely lies in establishing protocols specifically for cases involving Black individuals found hanging, protocols that automatically trigger enhanced investigative procedures, community engagement, and transparency measures. Such protocols would acknowledge historical context while ensuring proper investigation of each individual case. Earl's death and the community's response illuminate broader questions about race, justice, and trust in American institutions. The quick suicide ruling is ridiculous. Regardless of what they think is their accuracy, it demonstrates a failure to understand and address everything that is important, and especially the historical context that shapes how such cases are perceived. For Black communities, cases like Earl's represent a test of whether America has truly moved beyond its lynching past, or whether the same patterns of violence and cover up continue in new forms. The speed with which authorities dismissed community concerns echoes historical patterns that many hoped were permanently behind us. The case also highlights the importance of cultural competency in law enforcement. Investigators handling cases involving historical racial trauma need to understand how that history shapes community perceptions and responses. Failure to acknowledge this context undermines trust and effectiveness. Moreover, these cases raise questions about the burden of proof in racially charged circumstances. Ask the question: should authorities be required to definitively rule out foul play before concluding suicide in cases involving Black individuals found hanging? Of course. How can investigations be structured to address both factual accuracy and community confidence? The persistence of these cases suggests that neither the threat of racial violence nor the trauma it creates has been fully addressed in American society. Each case becomes a reminder of unresolved historical wounds and ongoing vulnerabilities. Earl D. Smith was 58 years old when he died. 2025. He was a husband, a father, grandfather, and great-grandfather who had recently renewed his faith through baptism. His death on June 18, 2025 in Albany, New York, has become a part of a larger conversation about justice, investigation standards, and historical trauma. Whether Earl's death was suicide, as police concluded, or something more sinister, which we can foresee, and as his family suspects, may never be definitively known. But his case serves as a reminder that the legacy of lynching continues to shape how such tragedies are perceived and investigated. Earl Smith's life mattered. His death matters. And the questions it raised about justice, thoroughness, and trust matter for all of us as we continue working towards a society where every death receives the investigation it deserves and every family receives the answers they need. We can't joke ourselves anymore, ladies and gentlemen. We have to admit that racism still stands and lynching is still happening in 2025. To the young and to the mature. There are people out there every day saying things that they shouldn't, doing things that they shouldn't. They think they can keep it undercover. As a matter of fact, this channel was made because of one woman's comment to me about being white when she knows my ancestry is black. Because I'm fair skinned, she had the audacity to say to me in an open public establishment, she yelled it out, "You're white!" Just like that. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to fight her. I'm going to fight her ignorance. And I'm going to fight it on a platform just like this. And today we fight for Earl Smith. His name was Earl Smith. He deserves to be remembered, not just as a case or controversy, but as a person whose life had meaning and whose death demands our attention. Thank you so much for joining Innocence Stolen. Please take a moment to subscribe. Don't forget to leave a purple heart below in the memory of Earl Smith. Pray for his family. Pray for our society. And pray for those ignorant people, because when they see God, they most likely will feel like they're in hell for the things that they have done and the things that they have said against the most beautiful race on earth. Thank you. This is Innocence Stolen.
Born under shadows of a cruel, cruel sky, where the whip cracked louder than a baby's first cry. They stole our names, they stole our grace, left us running